Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Talking Sense with Alasdair Milroy from Breaking the Mold Accounting right here on Yachting International Radio. Hi, Alasdair. How are you?
Hi, Ria. I'm really well, thanks. Yeah, I think spring's finally arrived.
Yes, well, it's exciting, and it's nice to be able to go into the closet and pull out something other than, a heavy sweater and jeans.
Beautiful, isn't it? It's yeah, certainly here. It's the weather's settled down, and we're starting to get some warmth in the sun, so it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, with electricity prices having risen straight across the face of the planet, and gas prices having risen, it's nice to know that we don't have to have the heating on 24/7.
I think that's, yeah, for all businesses, certainly seeing some big rises in raw materials, which are going to affect shipyards and as well. So yeah, as well as energy costs. So yeah, even small quotes that have been out for a couple of months coming back with material cost changes. It's definitely something that people need to be factoring into their financial plans for this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other day I was down at the grocery store, and they have turned off their top level of lighting, and they just have, how most grocery stores, they have the high lighting and then they have the drop down in the aisles. Well, they've turned off the high lighting and just had the drop down in the aisles. And every time I've gone now, just recently in the last few weeks, I think that's the only lighting that they have on. So I think it's biting straight across the board.
Definitely, yeah. I've seen, certainly, I think aluminium prices particularly are up 50%, which obviously a big impact on shipyards and building or any work, really, even if you're doing smaller jobs. It's, yeah, if you've got quotes in place, locking in those prices is quite important. And yeah, I'm sure everybody's seen the same with, as you say, energy costs, fuel costs for vehicles, etc. as well. And obviously fuel costs are a big one for motor yachts. So yeah.
Well,
quite big impacts that new owners and also existing owners need to factor into their budgets and so cruising costs for this year.
Yeah, I guess the quote that you received, 2 years ago, how does that work? Another conversation. We're getting into something completely different.
Yeah, no,
I will be asking you at some stage.
Yeah, I can answer very quickly. I mean, I've seen that where a quote from 6 months ago, and the suppliers just said, look, we've got to re-quote the material costs. We can keep the labor costs the same, but yeah, the quote's not. You'll notice most quotes have got and actually for all businesses, you make sure you've got a time frame on your quotes, so it's accepted within 14 days or 30 days, whatever it might be, because you don't want someone coming back 6 months later saying that quote, and you've got an open timeline on it, and you perhaps feel obligated. So I think where there's such fluctuations in raw material costs, you need to put a time frame on when your quote is going to be accepted by.
But then there raises the issue. What, for the example of building a super yacht? You've made a quote, it's been accepted, and this situation that we are, experiencing now happens. How, do you have to honor the original quote that was done, 18 months ago that was accepted?
I think build contracts probably have that some of those. Trying to think of the word, but possibilities in them to change where there's raw material changes, that they will be reflected. Obviously,
so there'll be a clause placed in it.
Yeah, there'll be a clause in there, a legal clause in there to say, look, materials will be at subject to market rate, and obviously the stage payment. So I imagine most of those contracts will have been covered with clauses within the build contract itself.
Okay, interesting. Well, we actually came together today to talk about a topic entirely different, but I mean, there is so much going on financially within the yachting industry that, other things tend to arise, but we wanted to talk about cloud accounting. Now, accounting 20 years ago was, I actually saw a post just on LinkedIn today, ironically enough, where they showed the spreadsheets being printed off, and it was like, reams and reams and reams of paper. And of course, the bigger the company is, the more paper there is. And then, of course, we switched over to desktop accounting, where you entered everything into a program, etc. What is the difference between the latest, which was desktop, to the now, which is now cloud accounting? What is the difference between the two?
Cloud accounting is relatively new. it really started taking off, or was in its infancy, certainly in the UK and even in Australia around 2008, 2010, when companies like Xero started, which were bespoke cloud accounting products. The big difference is the cloud, which is, in software terms, instead of you sitting with the software in your office or in your home on a computer or on a server, and having to use it that way, the software is you're paying as a service, and it's hosted elsewhere. So to be in a big data center somewhere in the world, normally UK, US, or Ireland if you're in the EU, but could be anywhere. It's a purpose-built facility, very secure, backed up regularly. And instead of buying the initial software and then having to perhaps pay for updates, or if a new version is released, have to buy another version of the software when that's released, with cloud accounting, because you're on a subscription basis, as things are developed, they're just rolled out as part of the package and included in your subscriptions. You don't have the same risk of obsolescence with cloud accounting. But it's really, the big advantages are in the way it's used and the way you can use it. And a lot of that's, going back to desktop accounting, it only existed in that one place. So if your accountant had the desktop accounting, or if you had it in your office, you'd have to print out a trial balance and take it to your accountant. If you needed a report because you were looking at needing a loan from the bank, you'd have to print that off and take it to your accountant, and then he would be able to do a report to take for the loan application, or if it was a business acquisition, to prepare that information. So it was quite clunky. It often took a couple of weeks to turn around. You're having to re-input a lot of data, so quite manual process as well. With cloud accounting, because it's hosted in the cloud, there's real advantages in that your team and your business and your accountant can all look at the same data wherever they are, because it's on the cloud, and as long as you've got internet and a browser, you can log on and you're on the system. That means that if you need an advisor, an accountant, or someone who's external, or even if your teammate members are working remotely, they can access it from anywhere with a laptop and an internet connection, or even a dongle or 4G connection. The security, in these data centers is far better than you're ever going to have around the security of an office for backups, and they're purpose-built facilities, so your data is a lot more secure. They're more secure, and cyber security, I think, is much better protected. I don't know. I know certainly Xero now enforce two-factor authentication, which means that not only when you log in do you have to log in with the username and password, you also have to have a code that's on an authentication app or your phone, or even a cybersecurity key. So it just adds a layer of authentication, and if you do move, it knows where you're logging on from, and you'll often get a security email saying, we noticed something's changed about the way you've logged on. Can you confirm it's you? And you'll have to confirm via an email with your registered address. So there's a lot of security built into the system. And then I think from a user and an advisor's point of view, everybody's looking at the same data in real time. So it's much quicker to, and gives, for an accountant, gives a much better opportunity to be much more involved with your clients' figures and know where they are, and be able to look forward more than waiting until you receive the spreadsheet or the paper and the receipts, and then having to put that together and then advise on it, which is the old way of doing things. Now you can be very much, if you use the software correctly, you can very much have that forward thinking and be pretty much up to date on your accounting, and then having that information, you can act on it in a lot more proactive way than in the past.
Now, the thing is, one thing people have to understand, though, this isn't a magic solution. You still have to enter the information. And I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles that most people have, is that you know, you get a couple of either payments or bills that have to be paid, and you pay them. You're like, oh yeah, I'll get to that tomorrow, and then tomorrow, and then tomorrow. And all of a sudden 6 months passed, and all of that information has to be entered in, and you've got to source it down. It's, you know, what would you recommend? Like every day taking 5 minutes to make sure that any transaction that was done that day is entered?
I think it depends on the size of the business. I
Yeah.
think weekly or monthly is certainly monthly. I think in with the sort of environments we're operating in, we saw with COVID, you know, those businesses who were set up, you know, classic example of being on the cloud, and you know, they're very easy to deploy your staff to different places, still be online, still be up to date. You suddenly had furlough calculations and government, you know, wherever you were in the world, you had different types of support that was available, but you had to be able to do those returns quite quickly, and a lot of those were quite complicated. So yeah, having it up to date is going to put you in a lot better position for those things that come along in business. And you know, as we've seen over the last few years with the current situation in Ukraine and the impact of that, COVID before that, you know, these things happen, and they're not always on our radar. And if you're prepared and you've got the data and the financial information, you're in a much better position to react and know where you are than if you're not prepared.
Well, let me ask you, are there, you know, a list of cloud accounting sort of software that you, or I guess it's not software, is it? If it's cloud accounting. Do you have a list of ones that are fairly easy to use, to, you know, for smaller businesses all the way up to the bigger businesses that you would sort of recommend to your clients?
Yeah, I mean, breaking the mold accounting, we're Xero certified accountants, so we like, and so we're certified to use Xero, and we're a partner of Xero. We made a decision. I really like the Xero platform, and we made a decision that, you know, for our own processes and to be really efficient, trying to service clients on the one platform's much easier. But there's most of the large accounting softwares like Sage now have a cloud accounting version. QuickBooks, which was originally a desktop, you know, had to react to this. They had, you know, Xero was really the first true cloud accountant. The desktop systems had to then catch up by releasing cloud versions, which now Sage has, QuickBooks has. When there's still a huge amount of businesses on desktops, and I guess it's great. You know, at least if you're on a desktop, you're not still trying to work off a ledger book or a spreadsheet. So, you know, having a system is fantastic. It allows you to do reporting.
You know, the minute you say QuickBooks, I have to laugh, because, not to date myself or anything, but I was once hired by a company to take, when computers just became popular, and QuickBooks had just come out with their first accounting software, I was hired to take their paperwork and input it into the software, their desktop system. We're not dating me here at all, are we? But that's how long ago. I mean, I remember, you know, that transition from everything had to be on paper, and it was painstaking. I mean, it was painstaking to have to enter, I think it was 3 or 4 years worth of information into the QuickBooks system. Oh, and I think I've hated accounting ever since. I won't even look at my own numbers. I just hand them off.
It's like all these, like all technology, you can't, putting the technology in place won't give you the instant panacea that you need to come up with the solutions. Yeah, and the most difficult thing with putting any technology in is then getting people to adopt and really buy into, see the value in it. So, yeah, ultimately these things come around changing the business and the people in the business understanding what the benefits are, and then being able to work with it. And again, there's one danger with a lot of these softwares. I mean, Waves is another one, and there's a couple of others in the UK which are quite, Free Agent is the one I was thinking of, which are free softwares. But like everything, a lot of these are saved. If you put this in place, you'll have all the information. It still needs, you know, needs to be set up properly. Obviously in Yachting you've got Volley as well, which is cloud-based and on a browser. But yeah, you need to set up the back of the end of the system, and you really need someone to monitor that and work with you if you want to get the best out of those, and get those efficiencies. So that it's definitely more than just putting the software in place and thinking it's all going to magically appear. And even tricks like, technology goes wrong. So I think it also requires a change of skill set within the businesses where, things like if you put bank feeds in place, it's great. All your bank information appears in your accounting software, but you have to put checks in place to make sure that they're working, that the physical balance does equal, that you've not missed any transactions, and those things do, they still happen. It's not.
Well, I guess it's a little bit like, cooking at the end of the day. You go, you buy the groceries, you've got all the equipment to do it. You don't just sit them on the counter and they make itself. You've actually got to do the stirring, and you've got to do the measuring, and you've got to do all of that stuff in order to make the ultimate product. And that's the same with accounting, really. I mean, it's a very simplified description, but essentially it's the same.
Yeah, it is. And it definitely takes, if you're going to go through or looking at putting changing to a cloud accounting, or looking at how you're using your cloud accounting software, actually, you've got to bring your own team on board with what you're trying to do and what the benefits of that are going to be. And that is likely to take some change in training, and you've got to look at why something's not working, or look at the reason. What's the reason for the resistance in your own team to doing something a different way, and really it's recognizing where that pain is, and is that pain big enough to force the change in the end.
Yeah, well, we will look forward to the links to the different software that you would recommend for cloud accounting. We look forward to that. And I have to say that next week we are going to be talking about risk assessment.
Yeah, I'll have to do some research on risk assessments, but it's absolutely, risk management is part of any business, and small business owners. We sort of touched on that earlier with the current crisis, looking forward, and what's going to happen with interest rates, what's happening with raw materials. The more prepared you are, and the more you can recognize and manage those risks in your business.
Well, and at the end of the day, if you don't keep an eye out for the risks, you could end up with no business whatsoever. And that is part of that risk management, is making sure that you're prepared for the unthinkable, which we are seeing right now. A lot of companies are facing.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's funny, I was talking to someone recently, and often, and it comes up quite a lot in yachting, I find people say, well, but this is yachting, you can never plan ahead. But I think you can still run through, and you can look at your risks. That doesn't mean you'll have everything covered, but planning ahead is going to definitely make it easier for a business, or even the management of a yacht. And I think certainly with the larger yachts, there is those plans and budgets in place, but it's often the way the humans are working in that, and the way we work, that you need to spend that time looking ahead and identifying those risks, and then looking at how you can manage those what ifs.
For sure. Well, Alasdair, I want to say thank you again for your time. Once again, it's been very informative.
No, thanks, Rhea. Thanks for having me on again. It's been great, and look forward to next week's show.
And if you have any questions whatsoever, Alasdair is more than happy to answer any questions, and we do provide his email address directly underneath his interview when it airs. You have been watching another episode of Talking Sense with Alasdair Milroy from Breaking the Mold Accounting. My name is Rhea. I've been your host. We'll see you again next week.